Hello and welcome. Okay. Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome to our continuing conversation on the profoundly important subject of happiness. I am your host, Sudarshan Sathe, and I'm here with Mr. Ratanjit Sandhi, whom, as you know, I call Bhai Sahab. Bhai Sahab, when we started this journey of exploration into this idea of happiness, you established right at the outset that happiness is not external to us, it's not in things, but rather it is a state of mind. And that created the opening question. If happiness is the state of mind, how do we chart a path to it, to get there, and to stay there? You revealed that the secret of happiness is no secret at all. It is right there in the spelling of the word happiness, with each letter signifying an idea, a way station on the way to happiness. Thus, we started with H for humility, A for appreciation, the first P for purpose. Now we are on letter number 4. What does the second letter P stand for?
The second P stands for perspective.
Perspective.
Now, we each have experienced life differently. We see life from our own lens and we form a perspective.
Right.
And it is good to have a perspective, but what happens is often we get imprisoned in our old experiences, and they then end up giving us certain habits. So our perspective, that's why each person carries a different perspective. Right? We see world differently.
Right.
And living that perspective many times interferes with our happiness. Let me go a little on a different path. You see a little child. They are happy, or they are crying. If they're in pain, they need food, they cry. They express very openly
what they're feeling.
Right?
Right.
But they live in the present. They live in the moment. Whereas what happens to us, because of our perspective, we begin to live in the past or in the future.
But not in the present.
Not in the present. Whereas true happiness lies in the present. Correct?
Right, right.
So it is rather very simple. We can tell people to live in the present.
Okay.
We can write books, we can have essays. Everybody has heard this word. Spirituality means living in the present. But we live by our habits.
Right.
Our habits are constantly reminding us what happened yesterday. And then, because of our perspective, we form opinions about a person. If I have seen a person with a turban, I formed an opinion.
Right.
Right? Whereas if you see nature, nature has never duplicated anything. Even on a tree, each leaf is different.
Yes.
So each individual is different. Each person is different. But we don't see that. We see persons in a category.
Like a tree.
Like a tree.
Yeah.
This is an apple tree. So what could be different from one apple tree to another apple tree? Although each apple is different from other apple. Right?
Right.
So Sometimes even the taste is different from each apple.
Right.
So once you have that understanding, that clarity in your mind, then you begin to experience the presence. When you come across another person, you see this is an original masterpiece. Let me learn about that person.
So here is this idea of learning and being in the present. So for the audience and those listening on the internet, do we broaden our perspective? Do we step out of ourselves and sort of look at our life in a broader lens?
Well, see, we have to also realize that there's a new day given to us every day.
Right.
Right? And that day never forms the same way as the yesterday. It's a new. So life is constantly given to us in the new form. If we don't begin to explore the newness, see, the joy comes, so the pleasure comes from experiencing old things. You have a taste for almond ice cream, so you are craving for almond ice cream. So when it comes, you enjoy it. That is a pleasure. That has a very narrow window, as we had talked about.
Yeah, different from happiness.
Different from happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness comes from continuous discovery, continuously finding new things. Even a 90-year-old person, when that person reads a book and discovers something new, it gives them joy. So happiness comes from constantly unveiling newness in life, reliving. So when you do that, you are alive. Otherwise, you are in coma. You are asleep, like dreaming. You are dreaming about past or thinking about the future. And you ruin your present.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. So we are trapped in our perspective,
Right.
which is formed by the past.
Right.
And in order to make room for the present, we have to let go of that past, that prison of the past, so that we could be fresh, reinventing ourselves, looking at ourselves with a fresh moment that moment gives. Okay.
Now, even industry. Now, you are a businessman. I come from industry. People who are listening to us, who are in business, they say, well, Ratanjit, we have to have some past. We have to, when we hire people, we look at their experience. Now, you remember our story.
Right.
You were at Polycarp. And when I hired the experienced people, when I started my company in '73, I had people with 20 years experience, 30 years experience, and they knew how to do things. And in 1980, I was facing bankruptcy. And that is the time when I brought in fresh students. Now, this was your first job with Polycarp,
Right,
remember?
exactly.
No other experience.
Right.
So when we had our people with zero experience, they were living in the present. They were discovering what to do, how to do. And we broke the mold of the industry. We brought in products and services which were never heard.
So in a way, we were ahead of the technological age, the tech age, where if you're thinking 6 months back, you're already out of time. So we are seeing that in business, that people are letting go of the old technologies and embracing new technologies. And it's like this, leaving our old perspective behind and facing new moment with a freshness.
Yeah, but now somebody can make a mistake, say, Ratanjit, we have to learn. We have to read books. What happened? Somebody has discovered. We have to know. Yes, we continuously learn, but we explore the newness constantly.
Right.
So this also redefines in the industry people that your competition is not outside of you. Your true competition is your last best. So if you continuously improve, what happens is, in that mode, when we are creating, when we are inventing, that is the happiest mode.
Right.
That's where your true happiness lies.
Right. So staying with the business idea, uh, one of the biggest barriers in business growth is someone saying, because we have always done it this way.
This way, yes.
So, I see that how even in business that can lead to stagnation, and so it is in personal life.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it reminds me of a silly little story. Remember the old-time kings, whatever they wanted, whatever they saw was attractive and good, they wanted to have it. So this king, in his travel, came across this young woman who was begging. And he said, gosh, she's beautiful. So he had her picked up and dressed up nice, and he says, this is, so they put her in a palace, gourmet meal, everything. As the time went, they found that she was losing weight. So all his expert doctors and everybody was around, and they said, well, look, we can't find anything wrong with her. So then there was a old person or a wise person. He says, well, let me talk to her. And then he comes to King. He says, look, here's what you should do. Build a little room and put little pigeonholes and put some old stale bread there and let her beg there. And that's, so this is again living in the old perspective.
Even when the food was readily available, she could not let go of the past.
She became the princess or the queen, but she wanted to live as a beggar woman. That was her comfort level. So the nature continuously enriches us, but we want to live in that old paradigm which we find comfortable. To experience true happiness, we have to let go of our comfort. That's what this means, ultimately.
Letting go of the comfort of knowing things.
Knowing things, old habits.
Old habits. So this is an interesting metaphor for life, where we could have a great life today, but we are still thinking about who said what, who did what, right, who got what, and that is spoiling our happiness today.
Right.
Like in this queen in this story.
Right. Yeah. So perspective is a very simple word. It's a very deep meaning. And to connect it to happiness, we have to re-examine ourselves on a daily basis.
Right.
Daily basis. So there is an exercise which I find very revealing.
Okay.
And a simple thing, in the night when you sit down, you find, what have you discovered new?
Something new.
Something new.
Yeah.
And another thing which, this Priceline, you have heard of this company. The founder of Priceline, who has founded Priceline, always has a habit that he always reads an article or something on a subject which he knows nothing about. Always wants to read something
brand
new, out of his subject, out of his expertise, out of his paradigm. So when he was 22 years of age or something, he was standing in line at the airport, and he was getting late. And he says, gosh, this is ridiculous. There has to be a better way. And so he asked people, thinking, he said, would you give me a $20 if I get you there first? He says, yeah. So that is what gave us to invent these things which you see at the airport, where computers, where you punch in put your card in, and you can print your own tickets and own baggage and all that. So that was invented by him. Oh, and he sold the company for $100 million or something. And then he discovered Priceline, because then he saw these empty seats in plane, empty seats in the hotel. He says, there's no, they're wasted,
Wasted resource.
right?
Yeah.
So if they can sell it for half the price, they'll be glad to sell it.
Right.
So that's how that whole thing was formed.
Right.
So this is the habit of rediscovering on an ongoing basis, which gives you enormous satisfaction, success, happiness, everything connected to that.
So coming to perspective as a way station on the path of happiness, you have to let go of the thinking of the past, barriers of the past, prison of the past, face each day fresh and anew with this open-mindedness. So this perspective really ties to being completely open-minded to life.
Right.
Okay.
See, now, there is another way to think. How do we put ourselves in the present? See, if I am a Catholic, and suddenly I get an audience with Pope,
Okay.
right? When I have an audience with Pope, at that moment, would I be thinking about my past?
Completely focused in the moment.
Completely focused on the moment.
Right. Right.
See, but we don't realize that even higher than Pope is always present in front of us, within us. The divine power.
Right.
See, we talked in our earlier show that God and you cannot coexist.
Cannot coexist.
Right? Either there's God. If there's God, then you have to disappear. And if you are present, there cannot be God.
God has to disappear.
God has to disappear. Means when I have my ego, I am present. There is no God. So you cannot worship God. That's a idiosyncrasy. So what that means is that God can die, so you have to die while living. So in simple words, all it means is you see nothing but presence of God and nothing else. So when you begin to see the presence of God, you cannot be focusing in the past, or you are an obedient servant to God. So how do you serve God? By constantly finding new ways to serve God. If you have a person in front of you, that is how you serve God. When you have a poor person or a rich person or a billionaire, you don't distinguish between. You are a service. Just like we talked about the example of Rose. Divine psychology tells us, which is present in all of us. And based on the divine psychology, if you study rosebush, you plant a rosebush, and one day a beautiful rose comes. Now, it gives beauty and fragrance.
Right.
But it really does not give. It is beauty and fragrance. And it does not discriminate when a criminal comes or a saint comes. Right?
Right.
So similarly, and that remains in the present at all times. It doesn't sleep.
Right. So again, now we are saying with perspective, we have come to a point of complete extinction of the ego.
Right.
So that the ego is not there, and then we can connect to the divine experience, the divinity within.
Present everywhere around us.
And so I am hearing the echo of the H for humility.
Right.
Because we started with this idea of extinction of the ego, and that is carrying through in this perspective idea also.
Right.
Okay.
So these are various windows we look at happiness, and ultimately you come to the same conclusion.
Many paths.
Many paths.
Okay. Okay. So how do our audience or people listening to us, how do they practice perspective on a daily basis?
Well, the best exercise, that I think is worth repeating again, is when you get up in the morning, do your meditation, do your prayers, whatever you want to do. I'm not condemning any of that. But then come and stand in front of the mirror and see this reflection of your human body and realize what a gift you have been given.
Gift of us.
Gift of this human body.
Yeah.
It's an amazing machinery. You don't have to do anything. It digests food. It does everything else. Right?
It even tells you when you should eat.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to be grateful that you have the use of this human body for one more day, because you don't have a license. You don't have a contract.
Right.
And then after that exercise, the appreciation comes in, gratefulness comes in, and you disconnect to your human body, and then you see in your eyes and see the presence of life. And the life comes from the divine power present in you. So now then you bow to that divine power which is present in you.
Right? So instead of seeing out from the eyes, we're seeing in the eyes.
In the eyes.
Okay.
So once you have realization of this, now this is again, I recommend that for 40 days consecutively, because then it becomes a habit.
Right.
So then you begin to see the same divine power in whoever comes in front of you. That constantly keeps you in present, constantly incentivize you to add value,
by
to
looking,
serve.
By looking into their eyes.
Their eyes, because you see the presence of the same power enlivening that body. Right? So
and this habit, once cultivated, you get to see that in everything.
Everything.
Okay.
So now that's how you carry this mission. This is, we have to understand, we are habits, we are not knowledge. So we remember things, we have degrees and diplomas and all that, but ultimately we live our habits. We do not live our knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you said that many times, that
Right.
knowledge does not lead to action.
No.
Only habits lead to action.
Habit leads to action.
So we covered H for humility, A for appreciation, the first P for purpose, now the second letter P for perspective. Now we are coming to the center of
the middle
happiness.
of this happiness,
Yeah,
center,
the very center.
Right.
And I have a feeling that what you're going to tell us is also the central idea of happiness.
Of happiness.
And I'm really excited to hear about now the central pillar of the word happiness.
Yes. And that is integrity.
Integrity.
And how do we get to that, we'll cover in our next show.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Thank you for your time and attention. We'll now go inside the studio and take audience questions.
And let's take a couple of minutes to
Yeah, we take about 5 minutes to go inside the studio.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll question and answer from the audience?
Yeah.
All right.